Thank you, Pastor. Thank you for trusting me with your flock. Will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth, the utterances of my heart, be the words, the message, the voice that these, your people, need to hear today. In many names, amen. So, today's message is about peace. Like peace, man, right? It's like, dude, may the peace be with you and also with you. Or are we talking about peace talks? You know, North Korea or what have you. So, as I was preparing for this, I realized that peace isn't one thing. Peace is a lot of things for a lot of people. Now, the Old Testament reading was kind of about landscaping. You know, you read that too directly, and John Deere and Caterpillar and them folks are going to have some good work because we're smoothing the roads and we're laying flat the mountains and okay, sure. And then the New Testament reading in Mark is about taking a bath. Isaiah, they're not building a freeway. Okay, all this landscaping is not about putting the Walmart over there. And it's not about the Supercenter. And nor is it about some kind of crystal cathedral for God. We don't need to terraform the world outside of us to prepare for God. That's not what they're talking about. Nor are they really talking about when they talk about the grass withering before the presence of God. Now that's kind of Old Testament speak, and it gets kind of fire and brimstone-y, and I'm with the pastor in that. I don't like getting fire and brimstone-y. It's kind of weird. And it doesn't really match with most of what the Bible says, Old and New Testament. And when you find a part of the Bible that doesn't really match, it doesn't match because you don't understand it. Because the Bible is going to match. It makes sense. It's consistent within itself. So when I read that, I realize, yeah, when it's really hot out and the sun's really harsh on grass, it might wither. But when the rains come, it grows again. And the flowers come back. So I look at that as much as a promise of hope as it is kind of maybe scary. But when they're talking about all this leveling and excavating and landscaping, what they're really talking about is preparation. Being ready. Now, where we are in the church calendar, we're preparing for Christmas, the coming of the Savior. And every year we prepare it. Of course, every year he does show up, so that's good. But the thing is it's talking about preparation. And that ties completely and 100% into what peace is. But when John was talking about preparation, John the Baptist, he was talking about taking a bath. But he didn't mean about just getting clean on the outside. You see, in Old Testament times, from the time of the Israelites' arrival in the Promised Land, they believed in ritual cleanliness. For example, after a woman had her moon days, her monthly period, she would have to get ritually clean again before she could be in society or go to church or do the things that she may want to do. And then after childbirth, it was required as well. And there was times that men were required to become ritually clean as well. Like if they slaughtered animals, that was something that they considered made them ritually dirty. So that then they would have to become ritually clean again. And if you recall from the Old Testament, that's where David met Bathsheba. He was up on the roof hanging out, enjoying some starlight, and he saw this woman taking a bath in her kiva and decided, va va boom. So anyway, that's what they're talking about. So this message of cleaning to prepare for a spiritual cleanliness, preparing for the way for the Lord to come within you, that's a message that resonated with the Israelites at the time of Christ. And if you think about it in a way, it really resonates with us today. That the idea of becoming clean and making yourself ready and presentable Because you don't want to go out in public. Well, most people don't want to go out in public until they've made themselves presentable. They've cleaned themselves and prepared. And so this is still a message about preparation, about how important preparation is. So, still, what does that have to do with peace? Well, what does peace mean? I think it means a lot of things. But at first I thought it only meant one thing. It meant an absence of violence. Because at its core, that's kind of the definition, right? But functionally, it has a lot of other meanings than that. You know, when there's a war, what follows is supposed to be peace. Chief Joseph was a famous Nez Perce leader. The Nez Perce are a Native American tribe that had lands and still have some lands in southeastern Washington, northeastern Oregon, and Idaho. They were a very peaceful tribe that just wanted to be left alone in their valley and go about their business until the army showed up and started pushing them around. Well, Chief Joseph had enough of that and started fighting. And he fought very, very effectively. In fact, won almost every battle he fought. General William Tecumseh Sherman, if you're from the South, I know you hate him. But nonetheless, he was a good general in the Civil War. And he said of Chief Joseph that he was the finest general that he'd ever fought. This is a guy that fought some of the best generals in the South. And the South had better generals than the North. But Sherman said that Chief Joseph was the finest military man he'd ever had to fight against. And the day that Chief Joseph decided it was over, it was done. Time to throw in the towel. He stood, invited the cavalry into his camp, and said, "From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." And meant it. That is peace. But then what the army did in Iraq in our own lifetimes, where we fought, we conquered supposedly Saddam Hussein, chased him into a hole, and then found him there. Then they shifted to insurgency, and we've had no peace. So peace really doesn't mean what happens after war. There's more to it. There's another definition of peace I'd like to talk about. For anybody that's ever had small children or taking care of small children, and I had 2 little boys that are really, really big boys now. But there comes a time when they're on that last nerve. They've destroyed all the rest of the nerves, and they're on that last one. And you say, okay, in my case, scream, "Can I just have some peace and quiet?" Now, they may not be fighting. They fought a lot, but they may not be fighting. They might be, completely or mostly nonviolent. And so that's not, they were being peaceful. They were just being loud. And so tranquility is also kind of a synonym of peace. There's also this ritual peace that I want to talk about. When somebody says, "Peace be with you," may the peace of Christ be with you and also with you. No, may the force be with you and also with you. Star Wars is coming. So the thing is, it doesn't really mean anything anymore with most people. It's sort of like saying hello or goodbye, which, by the way, goodbye is a contraction of "God be with you," that I imagine once meant something, and today is just kind of being polite. So that's also a meaning of peace. But that's not what we're really talking about. That's not the peace that we're here to talk about. Then there's finally like the peace of the 60s and the 70s. Like, peace, dude. Peace out. Make love, not war. Down with the military-industrial complex. Now, I'm sure maybe even a few of you have uttered words like that. And that's where the dude comes in. So not everybody's watched The Big Lebowski. I know that. The pastor hasn't. That's a lookup. We'll call that homework. And it's not the best of movies. It's not a bad movie. It's a cult classic. But the thing I want to talk about, when I first read these readings and was thinking about peace, the dude popped into my head. The dude is the protagonist. He's the story that everything wraps around. And there are Jesus overtones with the dude. I mean, he spends the whole time in a bathrobe with long hair and a beard. And he's unflappable. No matter what happens, he's unflappable. He is exactly who and what he is. He's the dude. And the dude abides. Now, what happens in the movie, just so you know, is there's another Mr. Lebowski. And Mr. Lebowski, the businessman, has a young wife, probably a third his age, who got into financial trouble. The thugs misunderstood which big Lebowski they're looking for, and they go in and they beat up his house and pee on his rug. And that rug really held the room together. So he's upset about this rug, and he goes to see the other Lebowski to get some kind of, pay to fix my rug, or whatever. And it doesn't go well. But he's this laid-back guy that's totally unflappable. But when he is mistreated, he doesn't get angry. He doesn't get upset. He gets indignant, sure. And he goes and he tries to solve the problem that he now has. He says, "This aggression will not stand, man." That's a quote. And so he goes in and he talks to this Mr. Lebowski, who calls him, of course, Mr. Lebowski. And he says, "You're Mr. Lebowski. I'm the dude. That's what you call me." Or his dudeness, duder, or El Duderino if you're not into that whole brevity thing. So the dude doesn't sweat the small stuff. He doesn't get upset when one of his friends pulls a gun at the bowling alley. It's like, come on, man. It's just a game. Chill. He's a dude. So I want to kind of talk about that kind of peace. The peace that's inside you. Not the peace that's outside. Not the peace you get from a hobby or what have you. I've not always been good about the inner peace thing. I've let the world whip me in a lot of different ways. I've spent time in combat zones, on ships. I've been in places where I was concerned for my life. I've had a commander threaten to throw me off the ship, not in jest. I was terrified, panicked, peace nowhere near me. But even when my world was rocked, there was a rock inside me. A core that wouldn't be shook, but it wasn't me. It was my relationship with God. And the thing with that is I started to learn that I don't have control. And you know what? It's a good thing I don't. Because I don't think I'd do the job that God's doing for me. I wouldn't make the decisions that God's making for me. I mean, I do the best I can day to day, but I listen and I try and follow, and I do the best that he or she would have me do. So I recognize I cannot find peace at a mall. I can't buy it for Christmas. It's not a hobby, it's not a job. I can't find it with sex or satiation. But I can make myself ready for the Lord. I can smooth out the rough edges that exist within me. I can level the mountains of pain that I have. I can fill in those valleys of sorrow. I can open my heart, not only for the Lord, but for my fellows. Because there's love out there. And as long as you keep your heart closed, you'll never find it. The taller you build the castle walls, all you're doing is holding your own self in. So, as I understood and came to understand, and I still struggle with finding that inner peace that I need to find day to day in a world that's nothing like peaceful, where there's scary stuff happening, and for real scary stuff happening. But there's a rock, and that rock's unflappable, and the rock's unshakable. And I have to remember that the dude abides, because the dude abides within us. Thank you, and amen.